Thank you for staying tuned. If you just tuned in, you are still watching Politics Uncensored, and we're here discussing good governance through documentation, why politicians should prioritize record keeping. Of course, we still have Are Oladoto here and Daniel, of course. Daniel, and let me start with Daniel. Let's start with a simple but important question. Why do you think documentation is important in public service? There's a lot of things that happen through public service, but I've noticed that most times it's always the health sector, the educational sector, basically really the educational sector, in fact. But I think I've seen more progress with documentation when it comes to the health sector. But generally, why do you think documentation is important in public service?
Once again, thank you very much. I mean, first of all, good governance in itself is simply the equitable distribution of resources across board. First of all, and now secondly, in any accountable democracy, documentation is not just paperwork. Read. It's not supposed to be paperwork. It is actually power. And it's more than power. It's more than memory. It is accountability and governance, as well as continuity. You cannot take away the place of documentation as far as good governance is concerned, particularly as regards public service. Politicians, in the real sense, are actually not supposed to be. They are not supposed to be. They are not rulers. All right, they are public servants. They are not rulers. And keeping records actually allows citizens to see what is being done in their name and what is being done with their money as well. Now, in the absence of documentation, then there is room for manipulation. There will definitely be room for misinformation, and of course, ultimately, there will be room for corruption. As at this time of our lives, we are very much aware that Nigeria loses billions upon billions annually to what we call misappropriation, what has now gained its very, very substantial presence in our lexicon. They call it budget padding. That could have been tracked with just what visually would have been just normal, proper record keeping. You understand? And what I've found out that in other climes where democracy is practiced to the best of what we would expect as a people, as little as legislative notes. Like in the U.S. Congress, legislative notes that a particular congressman probably wrote why he or she occupied that space as maybe a congressman, are kept in a box in that particular seat. The next congressperson that is coming will take those notes and see what this particular person did with the time he actually occupied in that space. Talk more of other people who are actually elected. And you mentioned a very specific thing about records as being kept even in the health sector. Of course, that is the reason why every now and then when you go to the hospital, the importance of records are not overemphasized. Yeah. You will always be asked, what is your card number? What's your card number? And you see the nurse will go to a cupboard where they keep their records, pull out your card number so that they can go through your medical history and see how it's happened, what happened. I remember having time at the Lagos University Children's Hospital a couple of days ago, and I remember that the entire period where a relative of mine spent at the hospital, the most important thing that the next doctor will come and do is to check the records and what was documented of that particular patient. That's how important. The next doctor will not be able to do anything without having the records that was done on that particular patient, okay, or maybe stated on that particular patient in the last time. And so that's how important we need to take our records taken. And of course, maybe as time goes on in the conversation, we'll start talking about the nexus between this and data keeping, data recording in itself. So yes, that's what I think record taking is as far as good governance is concerned.
Thank you, Daniel. I've always clamored that maybe our politicians should start undergoing certain courses, the way they tell Nigerian youths to diversify, be informed, be involved. Maybe we need to start asking our politicians to start taking some courses on project management, record keeping, accountability, Excel, PowerPoint, some of these things, so that maybe at some point they don't know, maybe they don't have what it takes to be able to do this. But I've always clamored for that as basic as every Nigerian who want to be informed, to apply for a
Interestingly, they do. I
job,
can assure you they do.
to do something. Maybe we should start advocating that our politicians should start going through certain simple courses that even the government have put forward for Nigerians to be able to tap into. Our politicians are as well Nigerians, so maybe that should start to apply to them too, especially the fact that they're in public service. But moving on to Ariola Dotun, in your view, what's the state of record keeping among Nigerian politicians? I'm talking from federal to local government levels.
Well, in terms of record keeping is of different interpretation. Record keeping in terms of accountability and finances, record keeping in terms of administration and clerical duties, record keeping in terms of the general overview from the Nigerian perspective. From the accountability and transparency, yes, an average politician knows how much is coming into the local government, state coffers, as far as we are all concerned. Where it now comes to issue of fidelity, probity, and transparency, that's where we need to now tackle. There is no department of government that does not have records of all its. And that is why it's very easy for EFCC or Nigerian police, whenever they are investigating, to go into the records to find out which money is being embezzled, which money was not used for the procurement of whatever, or however, if there are fault lines or breach of laws in terms of procurement law, because there are so many agencies who just bring in their cronies, their companies to come and take up contract in the name of contract, which are not supposed to be under civil service rule. So there are a lot of infractions, legal infractions, that are now being customized as part of the rules of engagement. So in terms of our knowledge of governance, I've always suggested that average person from councillorship to chairmanship, sometimes you just pick people from the street, thinking because they have money, they are a good giver. Being an humanitarian person does not make you a good administrator or a politician. Absolutely. We mistake it here. So people say, oh, being going to church, oh, it will be a good commissioner. You can have a labor union president. When he becomes to become a governor, do you expect that labor union to now bring the same mentality to governors? No, it's a different climb. We make a lot of mistakes thinking that our politicians knows it all, because there is no proper training. Even when they are being sworn in, they just go for 1 or 2 weeks picnic, thinking that is an orientation. That is not the way it's supposed to be. Even in America, for you to get to some stage of life, you get to have some credentials by going to Harvard for some special professional courses. How many of our chairman or councillor attend professional courses? Or do they even know how to keep record keeping? Or do they even have the credentials? A lot of them are private, secondary school, primary school holders. So then how do you know the capacity of those that are being appointed as ministers or commissioners? Majority of them are not even have the credential to fit into particular position they are being given. And it is now an endemic situation that for us to get it right, we need to have a new laws that regulate that for you to become XYZ as a president, you must be a professional, you must have had DSC as a qualification. If the first job of the country is given to an SSCE, that is the symptoms of failure of that country. For our country today, for you to become a president, you don't need to pass your SSCE. You just need to go through, even if it is F9 parallel, or they can give you, they can provide you a testimonial that you just went through SSCE. That spares you. But for you to become a just grade 2 teacher, somebody will tell you must have BSc HND, you must have 10 years experience. But for you to become a president, a governor, nobody asks for your experience. Anybody that you just think you are electing within your community, do you ask questions about who you are electing from day one? We don't. We all are guilty of this. It's not just a PDP or APC thing. Anybody can just come and tell us all the garbage. Look at how Buhari came with his change mantra and all this stuff. At the end of the day, he messed up bigly. So without much ado, we need to begin to get things rightly from our educational system. The way our manner of education is even wired, is wired for failure ab initio, because you cannot go to primary from primary 1 to primary 6, which is just a waste of time. You can't spend no less than 4 years in primary education. You should be able to have all the necessary knowledge. 3 years in your tertiary education, you don't need 4 years. Even in America, their system of tertiary institution is 3 years course. They don't go for NYSC, but yet we will go for NYSC. You will spend 1 year this, 1 year that. Those are just waste of time and delay. So for us to get it right, we've wasted much time on wastages that are not in tandem with development. Until when we program this country for development, issue of record keeping will just be by the wayside. What is most important is not that record, but the capacity of those that we are electing. They do not even know what is the meaning of record keeping. A lot of them employ specialists to come and help them to midwife their position. They employ them as SLAs. So if you want to become a senator and you don't know what lawmaking is all about, you just go there and start rubbishing the position, unlike what we are seeing at the level of Senate now. If that place were to be a disciplined house, no person will get there and say, oh, because they did not put me in a position, the camera will catch me. They will now start an infighting, embarrassing the whole nation, because there is no discipline from the head of the house to the last person in the house. Everybody seems to be on the same page. Nobody is insulated from the indiscipline. So once a country is discipline-minded and we have a law that is properly regulated, our constitution today is a decree. As a constitutional lawyer, I've argued it, that we can never have a country if we are still operating Abdul Salami Decree 24, which does not connote the entire mind of all Nigerians. We are just caged because we want a democracy of necessity. Now we have spent over 20 years, 26 years on now, we can still get it right. There is room for improvement.
Thank you very much, Ariola Dotto. And I like your last statement and even the ones you said earlier about the fact that we now have to start attaching capabilities and strict rules to the kind of people that we allow govern us in Nigeria. And I've strongly spoken about how the president, how you could come and say that you're running for presidency and all you have is an SSE certificate. Not that you passed, but just by the virtue of owning one testimonial that you went through senior secondary school. And while a lot of other people can add the ESQ, PhD, doctor, and all of this to their name, it certainly doesn't hold so much effect when it comes to still running for office. So what are we expecting from our governors, our presidents, you know, our councillors, if we don't start with what they are supposed to have, the kind of skills they're supposed to have for those roles? So I completely agree with you. But still talking about documentation, proper documentation, especially in governance, from a traditional and, you know, institutional perspective, how do we start to balance oral history? Most of the time we're just talking about it. My dad used to talk to me about what happened in the 60s, what happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s, but that's all I know. If I go online sometimes, I struggle to find some of the things that he experienced, you know, online, to be able to try to connect with what has happened in the past and what we could project to happen, you know, in the future. So I would like to ask you, how do we start to balance oral history with proper documentation, especially in governance?
Yes, to have the oral history balance, we must first of all look at our curriculum. The day the federal government removed history as a subject, we killed our memories. That is why it's easier for anybody to dump anything before us, and we just live by it by the day. So what we need to do now, we have the National Archives, we have the National Library. There is no reading culture again. There are a lot of things that we used to learn about. Maybe the advent of social media have eroded the culture of balancing our model of character. So once we can bring back history as a major compulsory subject, even within the subject of history, there must be topics that revolves around patriotism, topics that revolves around anti-corruption, topics that revolves around security and constitution, because we are not just talking about history and just reading some things like a fables, but you need to be realistic with the present. You must link history from the past to the present and to what development have there been. So the more we metamorphose from the archaic period, our present situation now is just like we are like an headless chicken. We are like a sheep without a shepherd. We are like a ship that is just sailing without a captain. We just have people that are the front burner, either as a governor, as a councillor, as a chairman, but no, a few of them know where to even navigate. They don't know. A lot of them don't even read the Constitution. Go and ask your assembly member today, from the day he was elected to the present day, can he quote one section of 1999 Constitution? No. He don't even have a knowledge of the law. No. Whenever they need to sponsor a bill, it is more like a penchant for man no man. Just want to do a kind of a choreographic model of presenting a policy, not that they even understand how to implement those laws. So we have good laws, but because we don't have a model of democracy, as far as our country is concerned today, my sister, you cannot define what model of democracy we are practicing. But from my own point of view, we are practicing a unitary system designed like a presidential system. It's unitary because our federal government is over-centralized. Without the issue, like the issue of state policing, should not even come up at all. In a democratic federal state, policing must have started from the councillorship position. Absolutely. Not even at the level of local government. It must have started at the level of the ward. From ward policing strategy to local government policing strategy to state policing strategy to regional policing strategy to national police. We don't have that as a layer. So arguing it would be as if, some northern regions say, they don't want it. If you bring another policy on tax today, people will bring it under the yoke of ethnic variation, which we are doing a whole lot of disservice to our development. Our politics, our democracy is not wired for love. It's not wired for development. It's wired, at least I've tried to describe our democracy. I've just described it like we are an election state democracy. All we run as far as democracy is electioneering, and electioneering. From day one, somebody is elected. From that same day, he's already planning for re-election.
Harala, thank you so much.
Possible.
I think we need to also take this all in, because you have stated a lot of facts, and I agree with you for a lot of statements that you have made. I would want to take the tech conversation on social media to Daniel, but we'll do that after we come back from this short break. So please be on standby. We'll be right back shortly.
Life is made up of moments, some that fill us with joy, others that test our strength. Welcome to Heartlights. This is our space to explore the highs and lows of human connection, the love, the heartbreak, and resilience that shapes our life. From relationships to friendships, parenting to partnerships, and so much more. Every week, we share stories and conversations that define us. Navigating love, separations, the struggles of parenting, dealing with anxiety and managing the pressures and stress of life. Real conversations that bring us closer, helping us heal, grow, and connect. So join me Mondays through Fridays at 10 p.m. for Heartlines, the show where we connect hearts, have real conversations with real people, one story at a time.
Thank you for staying tuned. You are still watching Politics Uncensored, and of course, we're discussing, good governance and record keeping. How do we start to infuse record keeping and good governance in our everyday lives as Nigerians? And Ariola Dotun spoke about social media and how the reading culture has sort of depreciated amongst us. But let me take this question to Daniel. What Ariola Tutu has said, how do you now think that moving forward, technology and innovation can be used to help public officials especially start to document and publicize their activities transparently? Many times I see it in magazines, I see it in, sometimes they show it on social media, on X and this, but this is not usually transparent in that sense. We just see pictures of one street, one road, but we cannot necessarily follow through what has been done. We had the likes of Budget, Tracker, all these people come to start to help Nigerians to access, the record keeping of their individual constituencies. But let's move it from external people who are now doing this. How can it be infused into what they do, internally? Public officials especially, to start to publicize, and start to document their activities, especially transparently. And this is to Daniel.
Thank you very much. I want to, first of all, really thank the RA for his very profound and very robust conversation on this topic. You can tell that he is speaking from a place of pain. We're all sharing this pain, For what you're asking as regards social media and tech, as regards this is where what we call data comes into play. This is purely a data conversation because for every record kept, the minutes of meetings, budgets, receipts, project logs, when you talk about census policy memos, it's pure raw data. And it is data itself. And that is when we now start talking about insights. Data insights, where we now start projecting as to what we can be able to do with the information that we've had from probably the previous administration or not. Now, without documentation, definitely, there's definitely not going to be a reliable data that we can now start to say, well, let us analyze, let us interpret, or show the data that we can act upon. Now, think of documentation as the very foundation, right? The very foundation, and data as a very structure that can be built on it. If you're talking about how much of social media can really come to play when it comes to all of these things, and you mentioned rightly what Budget is doing. Fantastic job they're doing, right? Now, that is, and you can tell that whenever Budget comes up with any of the annual reports stating that, okay, for XYZ states, this is how the current financial outlook for each state, or maybe the revenue from each state looks like. There's always this surprise and this G3 from the government in power in those various states. And they'll be like, where did you get that information from? They are surprised. They don't like the idea of the fact that most of the things that they do internally are being put on social media, or maybe the data now gives insights to the public as to what exactly is going on in their various states. Now, data actually transforms, or should I say, yes, data transforms documentation into insight, just like I've rightly pointed out. It is also historical, which makes it actionable. I already made mention of something that is related to history. Yeah. I was on social media some time ago, and I saw one of our pastors, well, I'll call him a pastor, where he was listing the number of courses that have become useless in our country. He mentioned political science. History happens to be one of them. And I don't blame him. In fact, he said useless courses. Like, what do you want to read history for? You don't want to read history to tell them what, your great-grandmother looks like, and all of that. And that is where our country, that is where we have dragged all of the things that we're supposed to do as a nation, as a people. That's what we have not become. And it is really, really, really bad. Now, another conversation is to see how we can also merge to data. Now, when we're able to do that, it means that we're using platforms to digitize records from ministries, agencies, and local governments. All right. Once these data or documentations or history or records are digitized, documents now become searchable. All right. They now become analyzable. They now become shareable. They now start creating clean data sets. Now, with all of this conversation now, we can now say, if, for instance, when the current administration came into power, they can have a clear-cut idea of what happened in the last 4 or 8 years of the previous administration. They have an idea of what is going on currently. They have an idea of what to project in the next 4 years of them being in power, right? That is what all of this conversation, that is what it draws us into. That is the reason why countries don't joke with what data is all about. That's why countries don't joke with all of this conversation that we're having currently. And you can see that countries that don't joke with data, you can see where they are compared to us. You can see how they plan their life compared to us, all right? And I want to also believe that, of course, it is not like we do not have the capacity to generate the kind of data we want or keep the records that we want. I already made mention of the average capacity of an average Nigerian politician. Sometimes I try to imagine what exactly could be going on in the heads or the minds of our local government chairmen. What exactly is the genuine plan that they have for our local government areas, our communities, right? When there's no such thing as proper record keeping, data sets that will help them to plan for all of this. Now, so we need to embed data culture in documentation processes. Every record should be kept with the intent of future use for data analysis. Now, a clear example is the fact that, just like I mentioned earlier, a health program should document patient counts. It should do that with gender, location, cost, and not just activities. And so when we do all of these things, we now know that we can now reanalyze all of the information we've gathered. We can now strategize. We can now know how much we can plan. We can now know the budgets. We can say, okay, for this community, because of the health, because of probably the resources that is coming up from this area, this is how much we can plan for these people. If it is food, we can know how we can plan for these people. All right? Now, the bulk of this data is only mostly domiciled with the statistician general of the Federation. Most times, when you want to even access these records, it becomes a little bit of a problem. Sometimes it's either the data is also skewed. So these are the issues that we must discuss as time goes on. But let it be known that we cannot overspeak on this conversation as regards documentation and dates.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Yes, we cannot overemphasize the importance of data for good governance and even for the future of Nigeria and Nigerians in general. But let's start to talk about consequences because we're running out of time. Do you think any public official who fails to document their tenure now start to face being banned from holding public office again? I would like Daniel to quickly give me a short answer, and then, of course, Ariola Dotun to follow after.
Oh, you mean if any public official fails to keep records?
Should we start clamoring for that if any public official who fails to document their tenure be banned from holding any other public office again?
I absolutely think it's the right way to go. But hey, it's a long call. It's going to be a long call. You and I know this. But the truth is that it simply means that if we are unable to keep data, it's going to tell so much on our performance as a people. It's going to tell so much on the kind of governance style that we're going to keep. Ares said that we don't even understand the kind of democracy that we practice. And I honestly don't understand it either. All right. And so if we continue on this trajectory, it simply means that we're not going to get exactly where we need to be. All right. We're not going to get there.
Thank you very much.
So yes, I support the idea that we should be able to do that if we can.
Okay. Thank you. Ariola, can I hear from you quickly?
Yes, I can. Well, in respect of the consequences, even in your school, there are regulatory government agency. Where lies the regulatory agency that will score you, that will even take all those your records? No, you cannot expect somebody to be his own teacher and you expect him not to score himself rightly. Every politician will come, they will maneuver, they will bring in, they can even bring in fake document.
Yes.
They can even bring in fictitious document to
Yes.
cover up. Then who is monitoring those documents?
Absolutely.
Without EFCC, does EFCC has a monitoring capacity? No. EFCC will never go into a case except you have been invited. It will only be a good omen before you come into government. EFCC will screen you. While you are in government, they will keep to screen you. Every day-to-day activities, they should have your records. Not until aftermath that they will now be asking the governor to come and explain. Who will not explain something to favor himself?
Absolutely.
Even if they have maneuvered, they will go and cover up. They use political connection to cover themselves up. Then who is at the detriment? The citizen. Until we begin to have punishment of capital offense for offenders or political office holder. If you steal money, you should go in for the same person that commit murder, because you have killed a lot of people by the fact that you have stole that money for that hospital. People died as a result. You stole that money for the education. People do not get the right education because somebody somewhere is amassing wealth illicitly. So we need to have a proper accountability measures, proper punitive measures, proper measures that will bring about development. So it goes in different ways in order for us to have a complete holistic development of our democracy. So
Honestly,
one very issue that currently bedevil our constitution today, our democracy today, is our constitution. And I'm sure, my sister, do you know our constitution till tomorrow is still a military decree?
Absolutely.
We are yet to have a democratic constitution.
Absolutely.
And that is the bane of the problem the country is being faced with today, because in our constitution today, you have a Sharia law and you have a common law. It's a total confusion. You cannot have two national laws in one document. So how do we regularize those problems? There are a lot of problems that are endemic that we are so distracted away from. Until we begin to serve solutions, we have a unicameral legislation at the national level. We don't need one House of Reps and the House of Senate. Those are just waste of time. If you can have a unicameral legislation at the state level, why do you need a double legislative house at the federal level? And everything is just a cumbersome confusion. And we're not moving. We are just stagnated. So we have a long way to freedom. But I'm confident that the present administration will see beyond political electioneering, take us to where we ought to be by giving us a new people's constitution, by providing the fact that they provided autonomy for local government is not enough. Beyond local, what about the implementation? What about the laws? So there must be consequences for governors that disobey laws. So that is where we are as the people. We need democratic discipline to stabilize our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ariola Dotun. Because we are running out of time, I really want to know, in 30 seconds, what's the biggest governance disaster that you have seen due to poor documentation? Quickly, in 30 seconds.
Well, there have been a lot of disaster. If you look at the way we are today, because of lack of documentation, we are in a very messy situation as a country.
Even in corruption.
Meant there's no proper accountability and nobody is probing them. There is now a coalition of the same people that enrich themselves corruptly. So we need to have a standard gauge. Until we have that standard gauge, we'll come back to have a comatose of the kind of problem we had during the NSAS, whereby millions of some youth were killed and nobody is being punished today. It's because of our lack of laws and proper documentation.
Absolutely.
So we need to solve our problem as a genuine Democrat. We must be patriotic to love our country. And that is the best way we can go.
Thank you very much, Are Oladotun, for that ending statement. We must be patriotic to our country. I really want to hear from Daniel as we wrap up today's conversation.
Well, I don't know. I don't know which one to pick. There are a lot of them where I think we just need an overhaul of our system. We need an entire renaissance. I think we need to, when you break down a house to rebuild it, that's exactly what we need as a people. And it's just not the government side, even us as a people. Corruption is endemic. Corruption has eaten to the very fabrics of our very human existence as a people. And I don't know how best, I honestly don't know how best and how quick we can come out of this whole mess. And Ari has said it, we need to be patriotic and look for, and make sure we just have a positive outlook for our country. And we hope that things will turn out to be best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and of course, Ariola Dotun. But as we close today's conversation, one thing is very clear, and even our guests have mentioned that leadership without documentation is like building a house with no foundation. And this applies to many cases where you may decorate the front, but the structure will always collapse when it matters the most. Too many of our leaders leave office with no trace, no written achievements, no project audits, no lessons learned. And at this point, governance becomes a game of stories instead of statistics. But here's the truth. Record keeping is power. Daniel mentioned that record keeping is power. It protects legacy, builds continuity, and gives the people tools to demand better. So if our politicians truly care about the development, they must start to document it. And if they want to inspire future generations, they must leave a trail of knowledge. And if they want to earn our trust as Nigerians, the evidence must be more than words. It must be written, accessible, and verifiable. This is Politics Uncensored. And until next time, I hope you stay aware, you stay informed. Before I go, do ensure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at Official Upgrade TV. Keep learning, keep staying informed. I'll see you again on Wednesday. Bye-bye.